Okay, I'm an alcoholic. My name's Tony. Great lunch. That was awesome. Okay, so we're going to get right into this, and then we're going to kind of pick up speed. But this is the most important area. That's why they spend almost 5 chapters getting us ready to make a decision with the doctor's opinion. A lot of people just skim right over this stuff, and they don't really have a full understanding of it. And in the book earlier, they talk about until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. Meaning the person who's afflicted with this illness, if you don't understand what you're up against, your approach to the application of a solution of this thing won't work. Right? You need to understand what you're up against. You need to understand the severity of the situation. And the more you understand the severity of the situation, the more it'll perpetuate you or move you into step 2. Why I say most people really haven't done step 1, because they're really slow moving into the rest of the steps. Right? Because if you understood what you're up against, or people who was dealing with you understood what you're up against, they wouldn't tell you wait 3 months before starting this course of action. Because remember in Bill's story, when he got separated from alcohol for the last time, it was imperative that his friend took him through this course of action right away. Because if he didn't get this thing, what was Bill's fate? What has been his fate? Yeah, well, he kept on drinking regardless. Like a lot of people were under the impression that to drink is to die. Well, they talk about a spiritual death, but they also talk about a level of an experience of 10 or 15 years. Yeah, and know people who've been drinking 10 or 15 years, like literal hell. Like, I mean, a lot of us could last a long time in misery. Anybody object to that? We adapt. Like, we could stay in situations that would be totally unacceptable to other people. We'd have people come and visit us and go, "Oh my God," and you go, "What?" What happened? Right? We become okay with unacceptable situations because we can't change what we're doing, so we change the situation, or the situation changes to accommodate what we do. Like, I don't think there's a person here that said, my last place that I ended up with, I look so forward to ending up there. That was my dream from junior kindergarten, was to get to a place where I didn't know whether I was going to puke or let it go both ends. You know what I mean? Like, my biggest hope was I could make it to the bathroom. I don't think that's the goals and aspirations of any young man, right? You know, just the inability to keep control of your bowels and your situation of puking green bile and like ruin every relationship you ever been into, and your future just looks totally dismal. I mean, how many people ended up there? And was that your hopes and dreams and aspirations? That was your best effort. So obviously there's something going on here beyond my capability of understanding, because that wasn't my hopes and dreams for myself. And I'd get up and try to create a different life, but I'd end up back in the situation again. So when they talk more about alcoholism, that means they're going to talk more on a topic they've already been talking about. Yes, no? We're going to talk more about alcoholism. So what did we learn about alcoholism so far? It's twofold. So far. Right? There's only 2 symptoms to being an alcoholic. So far. How many people are arguing about it? How many people notice that we argue about stuff that we're not talking about yet? Let's talk. We're not talking later, we're talking about now. We're at the blueprint of building a foundation, an idea. The way you understand it now will determine how you apply it later. So far they use the mind and the body, right? In regards to the body, how did they describe the symptom? The allergy. Are we all confirm that's what the book was talking about? Where did we get that idea from? From the doctor's opinion. It wasn't our idea. So now we have the same understanding as the doctor and the first 100 men and women, because they all agree with the problem and the solution. So I become a part of the collective. I'm not singular anymore. It's not my understanding. It's their understanding that I deem to be true for myself. Right? So I become a part of the collective. This is our experience. It's not my experience anymore. I become a part of, yes, I have this problem too. Right? And I got the idea from them, who got the idea from the doctor, and here's the examples they give. So it's not my idea. Right? So I had to get the same understanding as the doctor. But they also talk about that these people, that something kept on happening. Once there's a desire, they use it as the desire of the mind. But when we get to page 23, they say the main problem the alcoholic centers in is mind rather than his body. I don't know what you mean by that. And so they describe that as the malady. Is that my idea or their idea? Their idea. And so it kind of makes sense. Now I can see why I haven't been able to keep myself sober, why I keep on relapsing. how my first experience with the problem way back then wasn't enough to deter, change, or alter my course of action. And it's always gotten worse, never better. So can we kind of agree to that? Is that our understanding or their understanding? So now I become a part of the collective again. Right? So the more I understand this, the more I'm changing my views to adopt to their views and their understanding. So when we talk more about alcoholism, we talk about here, right, that in regards to the obsession, the idea that somehow someday we'll control and enjoy our drinking is a great obsession of every abnormal drinker. So would that refer to the problem with the body or the mind? Think about it again. Right? I'm admitting that I don't have a problem with the body. It's an association. The obsession is an association with the body. That I could control and enjoy my drinking. Because if I could control and enjoy my drinking, then I don't have the allergy. So when they use the obsession here, it's in regards to controlling and enjoying my drinking. Am I saying that or the book saying that? The book saying that. So that's the great obsession. So they say, let's go into this more, right? So they talk about here the idea that somehow, someday we'll control and enjoy our drinking is a great obsession of every evener. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. The persistence of what is illusion? That we could control and enjoy. They're very specific now about controlling and enjoying our drinking. The obsession is that I don't have the allergy, and there's got to be a way I could drink without consequence, right? Drink with impunity. Anybody like that here? So they're using the word very specifically in regards to a person. Have they done step one or haven't done step one? Haven't done step one yet. That's why they call it abnormal drinkers, right? So the persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death, meaning a lot of people won't necessarily need to seek help for this problem. You know, a lot of people who are able to drink still keep their jobs, but they drink all the time. Right? Because there's no consequences associated sufficient enough for them to seek help. They're able to somewhat manage or maintain or control. But then invariably things get worse, never better, right? We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholic. So to fully concede means what?
Give in.
Well, it means I've looked at the information that they're giving me. I concede this to be true. So if I didn't understand that and I just surrendered in step one, would I be understanding what the problem is? That's why they use the word concede, not surrender. I need to understand to concede to something means I hold true. Yes, it's true. I looked at the evidence and everything being presented. I concede this to be true. I concede. I submit. Yes, this is true. Does that kind of make sense? That's what. And to learn means I didn't learn from my drinking. I learned here what the problem is. So a lot of people say, I admit I was an alcoholic out there. No, you may have been suffering from alcoholism out there, but you learned what alcoholism was in here. We learned. What are we learning? That people who are alcoholic have a problem with the mind and the body. And this is what it looks like. Does that kind of make sense? So they talk about here, if we follow that line of thinking, this is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people or maybe has to be smashed. What has to be smashed? Which is?
Like other people.
The obsession that I could safely drink. Right? Now, once I learn I have an allergy, that when I put alcohol into my system, it triggers the phenomenon of craving, right? Which puts me through that spree that causes pain, suffering, and humiliation each and every time, most of the time, that I can't safely drink because of the allergy. That every time I put alcohol into my system, if I'm on this, I'm going to trigger the allergy. I can never safely drink again. So once I concede that, do I still have an obsession to do it? So the thought comes, hey man, it would be nice to have a drink. I could base, it's just a thought. Like, you know what would be really nice? You should see the neighbor's wife.
Yeah.
Pretty nice. I know she's married, but I've never met the husband. I've never seen him around. I'm obsessed with the idea. If you've seen her in a bathing suit, like I seen her in a bathing suit, this is before I'm married, honey. So it's like, wow, she's really hot. I'm obsessed with. Anybody ever been obsessed with the idea of a woman here? And pursue that and all that other stuff? Then the husband comes home. sergeant of the RCMP or sergeant at arms of some organization. To pursue that idea would be insanity. So based on the truth of her situation, I am no longer obsessed with the idea. I may fantasize about the idea, but I'm no longer involving her in it. Anybody?
Oh, yeah.
Right? So based on truth, I know I can no longer safely drink. So the obsession is gone in regards to the idea that I can safely drink. Right? I conceded that I have this problem. Now, that doesn't mean I can stay sober. What it means is, when I think about the idea of drink, I know I can't. So anybody ever refuse a drink here?
Yeah.
Anybody ever want to drink and know they can't drink?
Yeah.
They do that based on truth. That smashes the idea. So now we have a problem. So now they said, as we go through these pages, from page 30, 31, 32, talks about the allergy. And having conceded to this thing, when we get to page 33, it confirms this, that they're talking about people not fully understanding the allergy, that once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. They're using these pages to talk about the allergy. And they sum it up by saying, if we're planning to stop, there must be no reservations of any kind, no lurking notion that someday we'll be immune to alcohol. That idea has to be smashed. Who does the smashing? We do based on our experience and truth, right? But that enough is not enough to keep us sober. What that does is get your attention. That says that's the first symptom in alcohol that makes you alcoholic. If you don't have the allergy, can you be an alcoholic? No. Were you an alcoholic before you drank? Yes. You have to drink to be an alcoholic. I know that find that kind of surprising. But you have to drink to find out if you're alcoholic.
You have to trigger the allergy. Right?
You have to trigger the allergy. If I never drink, I can never trigger the allergy, and I would never get in trouble. So if I never took a drink my entire life, how would I know I'm alcoholic?
You wouldn't.
I wouldn't. That's the only thing that makes me alcoholic. Now, what makes me a real alcoholic, what type of alcoholic I am, is an entirely different question. So they talk about, as we go in here, they talk about, if we're planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservations of any kind. No lurking notion that someday we'll be immune to alcohol, meaning that I'll be able to drink with impunity. How will I know if I'm one of those people? I look back on my drinking history. Have I been able to drink with impunity? Without consequence. How many people here have been able to drink without consequence? I'm not talking about the one time back in 1972 when you got arrested, right? Like, we're funny people. We're the only group of people that, anybody ever been arrested here at a party? You're handcuffed in the back of a vehicle. You're the only one really unaware of your situation. You're handcuffed. Everybody's watching you leave, and you're saying, "Yee-hoo, I'll be back." And they'll say, "No, I won't." No, you won't. Like, we're not quite right when it comes to. Anyways, so we get into this. Young people may be encouraged by this man's experience to think they can stop as he did. He stopped on the basis of his knowledge that it was causing him trouble for 30 years. What they talk about is out came the carpet slippers, and he was dead in a short period of time. Because he couldn't make the admission that he was alcoholic because he was able to stop not fully understanding the allergy. So as time goes on, you ever hear our relapses get worse, never better? Why do they get worse? Because the allergy keeps on happening. And it's not in the book, but they explained it to me. When you're allergic to something, you get more allergic as time goes on. And so what happens has to do with our genes, a cell in our body. So our cell splits into two, right? And that cell splits. Right, it keeps on splitting as time goes on. So my mom's more allergic to strawberries now than she was when she first got diagnosed with it. As time goes on, she can't even be around it. So it keeps on happening. So what happens in our body is when we start again or we get into relapse, is like we never stopped. So if I stopped here, so if something was to happen, I found myself a drink in hand, at the level I was at, that I'd be dead in a short period of time. Like that guy out came to carpet slippers, even though he was able to control and kind of manage his drinking back then and able to stop on his own resources, he got to a place where the progression kept on happening. And it's a really good story if you want to look at it. He took a drink based on the idea that he would be able to enjoy himself because he's retired now, not making the admission of being an alcoholic, not understanding the allergy. That's what they're saying here, right? He thought his long-term sobriety would enable him to drink because he's never really done step one. He thought step one was the consequences associated with drinking, Right now that I'm able to, got my life in order, I could drink without consequence. He's never really, has he done step one? No. So they talk about here, this man, they think they can stop as he did on their own willpower. How many people are hoping to stop on their own willpower here? Through their own experience. That's what they're talking about. We doubt if many of them can, because none of them will really want to. Makes sense. How many people really wanted to stop here? How many people just didn't want the consequences? How many people wanted to find a way? There's got to be a way I could drink without consequence. If I could just not end up in the hospital, the neighbor's wife, stabbed, shot at, puking or defecating in my own pants, then it would be a good night. Anybody? Or is it just me? Some people don't want to admit it, right? We're having fun now. Whoops. We should buy the underwear by the... Anyways. You never know. Okay. Okay, and then now, not one of them because we'll really want to, and hardly one of them because of the particular mental twist already acquired. So the mental twist, is it in the body, the mind, or the obsession? The mind, the malady. So now they're calling it a twist. Twist that happens in our mind, and they're saying it's been happening a long time ago, but we weren't able to recognize it because nobody explained it to us. So this thing has been happening. So those of us who've been relapsing, when I said, why do you continue to relapse? If you look at the back of your papers, how many people put there, because I suffer from a malady and a particular mental twist that leads me back to drinking each and every time? How many people put a situation there that happened because hurt him, this or that, or I wanted to? Look at the back of your paper if you can't remember your answer. Oh, here we have fun. Now I'm getting a look. Don't go with my back of my paper. So we see that they're already the mental twist that precedes. So now they kind of get into this thing. And then they talk about page 35. Now they're going to talk about why we can't stay stopped on the knowledge of the allergy or step one. Why we cannot stay stopped drinking based on the knowledge of hitting bottom, surrendering, acceptance, and all. That in itself is not enough to keep us sober. How many people were hoping? How many people heard the reason I went back out drinking is because I stopped going to meetings? Yeah. Is that true or false statement?
False.
False statement, but we like to think if I go to meetings, that'll keep me sober, then I could be my own solution, because who's obsessed with the idea of being their own solution? We all are. That's the second obsession that has to be smashed. There's two obsessions that has to be smashed. One, that I can control and enjoy my drinking. We learn this idea has to be smashed. And the other one is that I could be my own solution. That also has to be smashed. Two humbling exercises in humility. It could come by two ways. One through learning and one through life events. Where does humility most works for us? Through life events. Oh, that hurted. Holy shit. That didn't go as planned. Or watch this, right? So anyway, so they talk about the mind here. So 35, which reiterates from page 22 to 23, they're going to say here, let's talk about the main problem the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body, because if I never took a drink, I never have the consequences associated with this. So this is really no longer my problem. Right?
Yeah.
So now they say, so let's get into this now. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse in the drinking. Well, what does precede mean? A week, month, precede. What does precede mean? Just before. That means somewhere here, something happens in the mind that takes the drink that triggers the allergy. It doesn't happen over here. It's been happening. It happens just beforehand. Something happens because we already agreed I've been able to keep myself sober on different occasions based on truth, right? I can't drink. No, I don't want one. I want one, but I don't want one. Anybody been there? I want one, but I don't want one. I really, really want one, but I better not take one. Because if I take one, I know what happens, right? We're able to keep ourselves on some basis of truth, but we really don't understand what we're up against. So they say here, so we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse in the drinking. For obviously, what does obviously mean? For obviously.
For sure.
Yeah, to everybody else, obviously. For us, is really? Really and obviously the same thing? Obviously, this is the crutch of the problem. We go, what? What sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experimentation of the first drink?
Sort of thinking, insane thinking.
Well, the malady. So they call it here, and so they get into our first friend, as we call Fred. And as we go through here, you notice what they'll never use again in regards to an association with the problem. They'll never use this word again. What word? Huh?
Obsession.
Obsession. They'll never use that word again because we already admitted we have a problem. The obsession refers to people that don't think they have a problem. They haven't done step one yet. Once you've done step one, you're no longer dealing with the obsession. You're dealing with the thought process that precedes the first drink, which is the insanity, the blank spot. They call it a phenomena. Right? There's something that parallels with our sound thinking. And they talk about this on page 37. After describing this guy who puts an ounce of whiskey in his milk, he knew that if he was to take another drink, all would be gone. How many people here knew if you took another drink, you're over? It's over.
Yeah.
This guy knew that, and he knew he would lose everything if he took another drink. He ends up in a place he's been many times before. Everything is going good. There's no thought of drinking whatsoever. There's no obsession. There's no thought. He knows he can't drink again. There's nothing. He orders a milk, and suddenly the thought would be a good idea to have a shot of whiskey, end up back in the puzzle factory and lose everything I own, and boy, it's going to be one hell of a night. That's the truth, right? But he doesn't see that. It'd be nice to order an ounce of whiskey and put it in my milk. As an observer, do you think that's kind of crazy? Based on his story? But as a participant, do you understand that kind of thinking? Anybody have the suddenly here? Anybody ever leave treatment or going to treatment, leave detox, going to hospital, leaving jail, going to jail? Anybody find the right moment? The hell, it sounds like a drink would be a good idea right now. And you've tried recovery before. Yeah. A couple times. You've been a total shit show. Yeah. And there's nobody as thrilled about you as you are with you when it comes to your drinking. Yeah. And you did it again. Yeah. And you know what? You think that's funny? I'm going to do it again. How do you feel about that? Oh my God. Right? That's kind of like makes you go, oh my God, wait a minute. You mean I'm going to do it again? Yeah. Means relapse is coming. Means when I actually do step one, what I'm admitting to is I'm going to relapse again. 100%. So what's the promise of step one?
You're not going to drink again.
I'm going to drink again. That's the promise of step one. And step one never changes. It never changes. That is step one. That is alcoholism. How many people feel good about their step one now?
Awesome.
How many people felt good about the other step one? I've done it. I feel good. You ever hear, I like these guys coming to church. I just did step one. I feel so good. I want to do your step one. Right? Because when I do this step one, that's not good news. And how many people like that idea?
Johnny A. Langley Bike.
Right? So they talk about here. You may think this in the extreme case to us is not far-fetched, for this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us, not some of us, every single one of us has this thing. And it's been happening long before I suspected it was a thing or even a problem. It's been eating my lunch long before I thought it was even going on. People have been going on me, what are you doing? You drinking again? Anybody have that question? And you look at them, what do you mean? Why wouldn't I be drinking again? Anyways, we have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences. Anybody ever reflect upon the consequences? You hear it, think it through? You ever hear that great piece of advice? Think it through. Play the tape through. We think this is going to get painful. I better get a bigger glass. That's what think it through means to us, right? So we warn everybody around us, hey, I'm about to take a drink, and as long as you don't put me in public places or situations, everything should be fine. But if you leave me unsupervised out there, we're going to involve the police and ambulance or some form of incarceration by the time the night's over. Anybody have that kind of story here, or is it just me? Yeah, so, but there was always, not sometimes, there was always that curious mental phenomenon that parallel with our sound thinking. So phenomenon, what does that mean? More than one event, more than one way it disguises a phenomena is singular, right? So they talk about the three phenomena, right? Phenomenon. So they talk about it disguises itself in a whole bunch of different ways, but invariably I find myself using again. And I'm always surprised that I'm doing it, right? So they talk about here, the sound reasoning won out, right? The insane idea won out. And so as they go through here, and then they talk about 39, but the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. That means regardless of your story, you're going to end up drinking again. Anybody have that here? Anybody have a full knowledge of themselves? They talk about that guy that left treatment. He said he has such a profound inner workings of his mind that relapse was unthinkable. Anybody here ever think relapse was unthinkable? Never going to happen again. But nevertheless, he was loaded again. Why? Because he didn't understand step one and he's never really done it. Well, he's done step one through his understanding, but he didn't do step one through their understanding. When you do step one through their understanding, you're getting that feeling now. Remember that guy that went in there and he asked the doctor to tell him the truth? The doctor says, hey, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. What means chronic? Repeat offender. Any repeat offenders here? He says, I've never seen one case like yours ever recover. The guy felt like the gates of hell slammed in on him, right? Like that's bad news. That you're going to continue to do what you're doing regardless. That you're going to get bits of sobriety. You're going to renew your wife's hope, everybody's hope. Then you're going to do it again. He says, is there any exceptions to this? The doctor says, yes. Every once in a while, since the beginning of time, there's been these things called a vital spiritual experience.
Miracle.
Yeah, so he says, to me, these occurrences are phenomena, but they seem to take place. And when they take place in people like you, these people are able to recreate their lives. So he kind of goes on here, and they talk about this other guy here, Fred, right? He says, Fred kind of goes, and this is what we all talk about. I rather appreciate your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink. Again, there's in case you didn't understand what the problem was before, we're going to tell you again. It precedes the first drink. You can't see it coming. Didn't happen last week. It's been happening all along, but your inability to detect it is the problem. You haven't experienced recovery. You've experienced abstinence. So what you're thinking is what recovery is actually been abstinence because the problem hasn't been rectified or fixed itself or removed. It continues. Because you can't see, feel, and touch it, you become a victim to it. Be it a couple of days, couple months, or couple years sober, there comes a time when we're without defense against the first drink. Anybody been like that here? So it's baffling now. It's kind of like, holy shit, I'm up against something that I can't see, feel, and touch, but I see what it looks like in my life, and I see what it looks like based on what you're telling me. Okay. You know what? There's got to be something I could do about this, right? And they talk about, as they go through here, they talk about Fred, and they kind of go through here, and then what's really, really cool is page 42, and this is worth reading because it's going to go into our next point here about the solution. So we've looked at the problem in great detail, right? And we kind of seeing now, by the time you fully understand this and you're kind of looking at your life in regards to this, you should be having a kind of impending doom feeling. You're looking at the truth. If your history has been relapse, what is the likelihood it's going to happen again outside of this solution that they're talking about? 100%. How many people like that step one? See, we don't understand step one because you bring up in a meeting topics, you bring up step one, not everybody likes that. And then you talk about relapse being 100% guaranteed, everybody gets offended. That's the same topic as step one. What are we admitting to in step one? That we're powerless over something that we can't fix, change, or see happening on our own. That's what it means to be powerless. Knowledge of that, does it change it?
No.
Doesn't change it. But it puts you in a position of looking for a solution to that problem. That's the only thing admitting does, is, hey, I have this problem. What's the solution to it? Because not admitting it, does it change it?
No.
Does admitting changing it?
No.
So that means I need to find something that creates change from this thing that I'm suffering from. Because if step one never changes, that means there must be something as an alternate that I could apply to my life that keeps me from the fate of this thing happening again. So they talk about this guy here that he thought relapse was unthinkable based on his knowledge. And we get a lot of that in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Like I've been doing studies now 29 years, like I said. And based on my own experience and all the people I work with, this is the biggest problem in this area, step one. They don't really understand what they're up against. Because who likes to admit complete defeat?
Nobody.
Nobody, right? And we don't surrender. What surrender means to us is I'll ignore, postpone, or evade. This is what surrender means to me. Oh man, that looks like a big bill. I surrender you to the unknown. Right? And what happens is life is preparing another bill. There's another notice coming in the mail, right? So they talk about here. He talks about his condition after knowing he never would relapse again. He says they had said that I would raise a defense, that they had said that though I had raised a defense able to keep myself sober, it would one day give way before some trivial reason for having a drink. Well, that just happened and more. For what I had learned about alcoholism didn't even occur to me. I knew from that moment I had an alcoholic mind. So what determines to have an alcoholic mind? Now they're getting into new conversations here. What is an alcoholic mind? You hear everybody say, oh, I'm an alcoholic. I did that because I have an alcoholic mind. That's an incorrect statement. Because a lot of people do stupid stuff who are not alcoholic. You know anybody here who's not alcoholic who's lost a job? You know anybody here that's alcoholic who's not alcoholic who's lost a divorce, jobs, life, a manageability, doing life in penitentiaries? There's a lot of people experience life in a lot of different ways who are not alcoholic. So what is an alcoholic mind? You hear that all the time, right? I have an alcoholic mind, right?
Or alcoholic behavior.
Or alcoholic behavior.
Special thinking, the ability to have special thinking.
So here they say, this guy said, I saw that willpower, self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots, right? And he talked about, I knew from that moment I had an alcoholic mind. What determines having an alcoholic mind?
Well, this malady pertaining to alcohol.
The malady, the inability to keep myself sober on that situation. So if I have an alcoholic mind, what is the likelihood of me drinking again? So something has to take place where in my mind to create a shift where I no longer have an alcoholic mind. So this is where I have a lot of fun, right? So if I go through this process and have the psychic change or spiritual experience, do I still have an alcoholic mind?
Yeah.
How many people say yes? How many people say no? How many people not getting involved? So if I have an alcoholic mind, I'm going to drink
100%.
100%. So a change has to happen in my mind that this problem no longer exists. Yes? No?
Yeah.
So that means I need a solution that creates a shift in here that takes away this problem.
Psychic change.
I need a psychic change or spiritual experience. Who was the first person that mentioned that? How many people came up with that on their own? The doctor. And the doctor, he explained this thing. It says until a psychic change happens, what are these people's fate?
Is it too far jumping up to ask you a question about, so step one, we admitted we're powerless over alcohol.
Yep.
We have that spiritual experience and now have a power greater than ourselves in our life, i.e. done the step three. Am I wrong in stating that I don't feel powerless over the first drink?
Yeah,
Do I have that power in my life?
yeah, you're wrong.
Good.
Okay, and I'll show you because that's the thinking that I don't like using the word wrong, but we look at it incorrectly, right? And so when we do these building blocks, if you follow along what the books say, this thing is put together like it's just, whoa, when we see what it's being said. And for a lot of us, guys like me and you and you and you and most of us in here, we need to look at things differently. We need to find out why it is I keep doing what I'm doing and why I haven't created the change or have felt the change that they talk about on the level to keep me sober. Because I can't afford too many more relapses. Because people who are relapsing nowadays aren't coming back. Like a lot of my buddies and sponsors are dropping like flies. Guys who've been sober a while, out one night, just doing a little bump, not here anymore. Like gone. Hooked up. I got a buddy right now on a little. It's been an emotional week. He's hooked up. I sponsored him 19 years, struggling. He had 6 years. He got into some stuff. Did a little bump. His girlfriend was in the shower. She was in there longer than she was drunk. She came out and he's on the floor. He's been there like they didn't know how long. They suspected 10, 15 minutes, and he's in So they were trying to resuscitate him the other day. They put him in a coma and all that other stuff. He was like, he's been around 19 years. What he doesn't understand was what he's up against. He's never really done step one. He's done a form of step one, but he's never really done step one. Because he's never really done step one, he never got motivated into looking what the solution is in step two. Because he had his own ideas of what step three is, he never really understood what he was up against. Does that kind of make sense? So let's look at this thing here. He talked about, I saw willpower and self-knowledge would not help me in those strange mental blank spots because of the malady, right? So now it's kind of explained. I'd never been able to understand people that said a problem had them hopelessly defeated. Anybody else here? Anybody ever watch somebody relapse and go, what's the matter with you? Come on. Anybody ever ask you, what are you doing? How come you're doing that? You hadn't had enough? So understand, I knew then it was a crushing blow. This is cool. 2 members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. They grinned, which I did not like so much. Anybody, you know, we get that grin. Hey, how you doing, right? And asked me if I thought myself alcoholic and if I were really licked this time. In that term, what does that mean, really licked this time? Defeated. That means my best efforts is going to get me loaded. That everything within my own resources to this far is going to get me loaded. Everything I've done this far has got me loaded. Are you done? So you being licked this time, now you'll be able to hear what I'm saying. Because if you're thinking as I'm talking, you're not licked. The ego is taking over. Anybody have that problem here? People's trying to save your life and you're arguing with them in your head. Shut up. Right? So what happens here? They talk about, then is really cool here. They talked about, they grinned what I did not like so much. And if they thought myself an alcoholic, if I were really licked this time, I had to concede both propositions. Again, to concede means to weigh the evidence. They use that word a lot, to concede. To concede to something, you need to understand what's being presented. Yeah, I concede to this proposition. I see what's happening here. I understand why I'm defeated based on these ideas. Right? So they grinned, right? And then they piled heaps of evidence to the fact that an alcoholic mentally, such as I had exhibited in Washington, was a hopeless condition. So what would they be heaping? What effects what would they be talking to, heaping on him the effects? So I could read that again. They piled on me heaps of evidence to the effect that an alcoholic mentally, such as I had exhibited in Washington, was a hopeless condition. They cited cases out of their own experience by the dozens. This process snuffed out the last flicker of conviction that I could do the job myself. What are we doing here right now?
Yeah. So I tried treatment, I tried steps, I tried meetings.
Yeah, so they're kind of piling on that this here malady has you hooked. You can't see, feel, and touch it. That you're in a collision course with another drink 100%. They talked about their own experience, how many times they tried to get sober, how many times they got loaded, how many times I did this, I did that, I was going to do, and I promised, and I would have passed the lie detector test. Anybody here? So when they size out of this and they realize that once I have this condition, this puts me in a place of beyond human aid. Now, if I'm beyond human aid, and I should be really feeling panically because now it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. My fate's coming, tick-tock, tick-tock. Right? That kind of puts you in a different position when you understand step one is that. When you most people understand I'll be okay. Because look, I'm going to treatment, I'm doing meetings, I'm in charge of my destiny. Here we go again. Is like anybody ever been on a roller coaster here? If you didn't like roller coasters, the first time around would be really terrifying, right? And then you get arrested at the bottom. You know how to arrest at the bottom, you're supposed to get off the roller coaster? We don't know that. We go, oh my God, that was terrifying. I never want to do that again. And then you hear click. Click, 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 click. You go, what's that sound? That's step one, representing itself. Right? Okay, you find that funny later. Okay. Okay. Then they outline the spiritual answer they have found and the program of action, which 100 of them have followed. What step is that? Then they outline the spiritual answer they have found. Then they outline the spiritual answer they have found. What step is that? How many people say 12? How many people say 12? Come on, get involved. This is a workshop. See what your thinking is about.
Spiritual stuff, sure, 12.
So that's step 12.
What is it? What's the question again?
So then they outline the spiritual. Then they outline the spiritual answer and program of action, which 100 of them have followed.
Step 12.
We're having fun here, eh? Okay, look, we're going to practice something together, right? This will probably save your life down the road. And remember, you heard it here first. At first, it's a little uncomfortable, but you'll find it really useful when talking to your sponsor and make conversations a lot shorter. Ready? It's going to be profound. I don't know. I know.
That's not an answer.
But you can practice that in front of your mirror and what? Nothing will happen. I wouldn't do it here because you never know what happens. But it's really amazing. Like, there's like, can I have 5 more answers? 5 more guesses? We're all like that, right? Like, I don't know. I can't admit that. Right? Okay, so what step is that?
I don't know.
Hey, there we go. It's actually step 2. Step 2. They're practicing step 12.
Wow.
They're carrying a message to a person who's afflicted with alcoholism. They're carrying this message, which is a solution to their dilemma. Right? What's the solution to step 1? Step 2.
That no human power.
It explains what the solution is. Right? Remember when Ebby was sitting with Bill? Ebby was talking about, we understand, as step 12, but he was talking to Bill about step 2, was the solution to his problem that he hadn't contained yet. Remember that conversation? So now we're having fun. When did we start?
2.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So now we're having fun. Okay. So now he's talking to him about the problem.
Which is step 1.
1. Right?
Yeah.
So in that condition, we know what our fate is 100%. Right? So Ebby's talking to Bill. Bill kind of looked and said there was no more power in him than there was in me at that time. But there was something, he was inwardly changed. There was something different about him. He seemed to have a solution to the dilemma that's killing me. So he was interested. But his thinking kept on getting in the way. Remember when Ebby was talking, his thinking was kind of, nobody has that problem here. Somebody's trying to help you and you're thinking.
Yeah,
So he says what he found was a spiritual answer. He called them religious ideas that he put into practice that created a change sufficient enough for him to recover. The evidence was there. At that moment, he kind of was alarmed. And he says, were all these other people right after all? Because he's seen sitting across the table was this miracle at 2 months sober. He couldn't argue with the evidence that was being presented. So his friend said, this is the things I did to experience this. Right? And Bill says, well, it was only a matter of being willing to do what his friend did. Right? Remember that conversation? That I might build what I saw in my friend if I did what he did. So what Ebby was talking to him about was the experience that he had in 12 through the course of action he did in 2 that other people presented to him, right? So when we look at the course of action, came to believe that power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I don't know what they mean by it. So if I suffer from insanity, what would be the solution? Sanity. That means I have to undergo a shift in my thinking where I'm no longer afflicted with the problem anymore. Who's that song? Blow a leak or something? Too much information. You're holding your head. Nobody's head's ever exploded as a result of going through this thus far. This might be a proof. So it's so simple, isn't it? When you think about it. So they're saying this is the solution to this, but I don't know what this is yet. So they got to explain the outline of program of action that they took to create this change. Right? And they said, as a result of this course of action, they've undergone a psychic change or spiritual experience. When we get to step 10, they say the problem has been removed. What problem has been removed?
The trade slide.
This problem that centers in my mind. So I no longer have an alcoholic mind as the result of this course of action. I've had a shift or spiritual experience. In order to maintain that, I need to find a recipe that I need to incorporate in my life to save me from me. I need witness protection. Because there's somebody trying to kill me and it's been me. Right? So I need a new identity. spiritual experience, a psychic change. I need to undergo a profound alteration in my thinking attitude about life because there's somebody out to kill me and I don't know what he looks like. And that person's in my head. My head's got a contract down on my ass. And so my sponsor kind of said, we're putting you into witness protection. That's what step 2 is. Are you ready to sign up? That's step 3. The identity starts in step 4. And I go through a process of creating a shift sufficient enough where I'm no longer that person. Doesn't mean I don't think about being that person. I'm no longer that person. Does that kind of make sense? And I said, as long as I pursue a spiritual answer for this, and I continue to go to the second half of how it works, talks about the principles we have set down are, what's that? Guides to progress. I can claim progress now. Before it was always stagnation. It was always going back to the same shithole I was getting away from. Anybody ever, why is this always happening to me? I can't believe this is happening again. Well, why not? You're the only one that can't believe it. Everybody else knows it's just a matter of time. There they go again. Broken GPS. If your GPS is not working, that means, so as we go through this, which is really cool, they talk about here, which a lot of people don't understand, they talk about, we have 2 alternatives. Meaning, they've explained the situation, the solution. I need to undergo a psychic change, a spiritual experience. I need to access some form of power. It becomes personal to me. It creates this change in my psyche, which they explain in the back of the book. So I'm seeing all this information, and I see the examples of it by everybody who went around me. I said, this thing is obtainable, because look at that whack job. Look at that guy. I can't believe the way he used to be, and he's in the condition he is in now. Man, if it works for a nut bar like that, I mean, I'm a shoo-in. I'll bet you a couple people thought that looking at me and said, oh my God, look at that guy. If it's working for him, you feel better, right, about your story after mine? Yeah, he's like, yeah. I'll keep drinking. You can have my story too. Right? My recovery. So that's what I love about AA, right? You can have one or the other. It's like the yet factor, right? The nip of the ringer, right? So I understand what this is being presented, and I understand it has to come as a result of a course of action. I need things explained to me different. I'm like something the matter with the way I process things. I don't know if anybody's like that here. Here's what it looks like. If you're driving along the road, and depending on how hammered you are, you get a flat tire. Do you notice there's something fundamentally wrong with your vehicle? Some of us try to ignore it. Then you get to a place where there's actually sparks flying from the tire. Anybody ever try that? And you can no longer postpone or evade the situation, you have a problem. Right? Other than everybody driving by pointing to the fact there's sparks flying from your car, this is kind of like our life. Everybody's going by and going, hey, what the hell? You're like, right? The car's like, so you pull over, you look at the tire. You realize the tire's been gone for a while. You're down to the rim. So you assess the situation. You realize you can't go farther. To continue would mean disaster. So you admit that. You accept it. You hold hands, do the serenity prayer around the car. You turn it over and let it go. And you get back in the car and start driving again. Does that make any kind of sense?
No.
How many times do we hear that in regards to treating our illness? Just don't do it. Surrender, let it go, turn it over. It don't work for people like us because we're not quite right. That works for people who are able to function at a level beyond anything we could ever understand. Remember I was talking about my wife putting cellophane over there? We're the only group of people offended by stuff like that. What? Intervention. So the way we look at things is fundamentally different, right? So they're saying, so when I look at that car, I realize that problem never changes by knowing it, acknowledging it.
Unless you fix it.
So now I need a solution to that problem, but if I didn't know what it was, the common understanding would be I'd need a new tire, right? Does that change it? I need to know what specific tire I need for this specific car.
You might need a rim.
Well, let's go with the whole tire and rim thing, because we could get really carried away, right? Well, the nuts might be seized, and maybe the ground it's on is off. You won't be able to get the jack under it. Like, you see how we can go? You just throw a match in the car anyways and steal a new one. It wasn't yours anyways, right? Steal a new car. Okay, so anyways, I love you guys. We're great. Focus. Okay. So, you know you need a new tire. Does that change anything?
No.
You need to go to the glove compartment box and you open the glove and it shows you where the spare tire is. And everything you need. Wait a minute. So, if you didn't know where the spare tire was and it was a newer car and there was a spare tire in it, is that better?
No, there's like one of those torque nuts there to take off the bolt. We don't have that special.
We're not there yet.
Okay.
But I like your enthusiasm. Okay, and that's the way we are. Well, you know, there might have this problem, so why even look? There might be a certain kind of torque nut in there. Did you see what kind of one? No, but we don't need to. We're having a conversation around something we have no knowledge of anyways, but let's talk. Does that kind of make sense? So I need to get the manual. The manual will say, hey, you know what, the tire's in here. Here's all the things you need to change the tire. They have pictures on how to change the tire. They have a course of action to bring about a change for this tire, enable you to have the problem removed that you can continue on with your life, right? So now you have the problem. It's really evident, and some people may have explained it to you, and some of the challenges around that, right? Thank you very much for your input. And then the turnaround. And then now you have the solution, which would be step 1 and 2. In step 2, it tells you the course of action you need to take, that as a result of this course of action, you'll have a new tire. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. That means my friend promised when these things were done, I'd have the elements of a new way of living that answered all my problems. That means this is the problem area for us. You mean I have to do it? No. Can I just have it? Yes. Okay. Can I talk about it at the next meeting? Yes. How do you know what it looks like? Because I heard him talk about it. So I know what it looks like. I can share his experience as my experience at the next meeting. And we do that. We're just chameleons. It's just the way we're designed. It's kind of like, AA is like an airport. Not everybody's going somewhere. Some people just like sitting there because of the entertainment or who knows why they're there. So what happens is, if we all went to the airport in Kelowna here for 90 days, an hour at a time, does it mean we're going anywhere? Would we meet people who are going somewhere?
Yes.
Would we meet people who are coming back from somewhere? Would we meet people who are living exciting lives?
Yes.
Would we meet people who are kind of depressed and going on vacation as a result of their life?
Sure.
Yeah, you meet all these different people. The difference is they're experiencing something that I haven't experienced yet. So this guy comes back, here's us. We meet 3 people who've been to Cuba, a certain area. The first time we think that's a very interesting trip. Wow, that's right, and he's so enriched with what they have to say. Then the next person you talk to, he says, I hear it's really nice there. And you engage in their conversation. The third person says, yeah, when you go there, you got to go to the store around the corner. You see the difference in conversation? By the time I talk to the third meeting or 90 days, I'm talking like I have this experience, that I got it all under control based on the people I've been talking about at the airport. And somebody goes, oh, have you been on the plane yet? Been on the plane. Do you have an itinerary? What's an itinerary? Your travel plan. Do you know where you're going? What it looks like? Where you're starting from? Do you need one of those? This is our itinerary. It talks about where we're at, where we want to go, and how to get there. Remember we talked about the travel agency? You see all these pictures on there? It says, wow, that looks really nice. And if you're living in a basement suite somewhere on the streets and you see the possibility of having this kind of exist or going on this kind of trip, if you're in depression, it's kind of, you mean I could go on a trip like this and I could enjoy this kind of life if I'm willing to do certain things and get a passport, do all these things necessary to get on a plane to go enjoy life beyond anything I could ever imagine? And the people around you say, yeah, we experience this on a daily basis. And what got us there was this manual. And what keeps us there is this manual. So when we go on that trip, we're at that trip and there's nothing that we bring with us. We're at peace, contentment, and ease with everything that's happening. We're not consumed with self and the possibilities of the endless pain of tomorrow and all yesterdays. I had no new peace and new freedom. So you're saying I could get this out of this? Yeah, but you need to go through this course of action to get that. So you mean in order for me to experience me getting back on the road, I have to change this tire? But knowing that isn't enough, right? I have the tire, I have God. No, you need an experience with God. A lot of people have God. That's why the next chapter, we agnostics, is dedicated to 3 people. The atheist, the agnostic, and true believer. All 3 of them have the same problem. Pretty hard to believe, right? Because we get taught here, find God. So everybody bypasses the first 2 steps and go right to God. What do? I'm looking for God. He's not lost. Right? What are you looking for? I don't know, but when I find it, I guess I'll know. So we don't even know where we're looking for. We don't know where we're starting. We don't know where we're going. We don't know what it looks like when we get there. What the hell? Right? So why aren't we getting this? Because we're surrounded by a bunch of people who are confused about the same facts. 11 years, nobody 12-stepped me. So when they 12-stepped me the way I'm 12-stepping you guys, a lot of it was like, whoa. Like this was holy smokes. And these guys were excited about their sobriety. And they were excited about where they were. And they said, this is what got them there. And that's where we are now. We're just starting this thing. And the enthusiasm I have is because the guys who went before me made it very possible that I could experience something on a level beyond anything I could ever imagine. And the question was experience. I used to get the 2 mixed up, right? And I say things weird because I understand it that way. Most of us have had sexual experiences alone. And we call that thrilling. And then somebody talks about the possibility of actually involving another person. That sounds exciting, right? But we haven't experienced it. It sounds exciting. And then once you experience it, no further explanations necessary. We've gone from somewhat thrilling, your first experience with you, to you'll be amazed before you're halfway through. You will not regret the past. No, once you shut the door. Like you'll be, no further explanation will be necessary. And that's kind of like most of us have the one experience of applying self to self, but really not experience this thing on a different level. Here in step 2, they're saying you need to apply it on a different level, but we need to explain it to you. Most people are trying to get it without the explanation. They're bypassing it, right? So when I take the manual, I go through the manual, I have the experience of being able to change the tire. It's not comfortable at first, but the result of doing it allows me to new freedom, new happiness. That way, when life happens, I'm able to. What does that kind of make sense? So when we get into this thing, we agnostics, we're going to have a couple questions here, and then we're going to kind of move on. So we agnostics is a summary of the problem and the solution. They're saying here we're going to explain the solution on a little more deeper level as we understand it. We're going to explain our solution to you as we understand it. It's not your understanding of our solution. We tell people now figure out what the solution is. It doesn't say that in step 2, does it? It says, came to believe that a power grants us to restore us sanity. I don't know what you mean by that. We're telling people go figure it out. You need to have God. It doesn't say that, does it? It says we have a specific solution for this specific problem, but we need to explain to you what this specific solution is to this problem. Then the pursuit of that will make a lot more sense. You'll understand, and the longevity is these 3 steps here will lead to long-term sobriety, long-term happy, contented sobriety. Because these 3 steps never change. When they turn into principles, you understand the basis of it. And a lot of people really... It is the ability to assess and take new action, spiritual action. So step 1 is what's the problem? Step 2 is what's the solution? Spiritual solution to this problem. And that never changes in life, right? Here we're telling you what the problem is. Later you get to assess what the problem is and apply the necessary spiritual tools to it to create a shift and change in attitude and outlook. Right? Finding a solution necessary. They talk about that in the promises. Bill talked about how an element of the living that answered all my problems. But here, unless this problem gets resolved in step 1, what is the likelihood of me experiencing anything else? 0. So the most important thing that happened for me as a new person is a psychic change of spiritual experience. The second thing that needs to happen is to learn how to practice these principles in all my affairs. Most old timers are trying to teach the new people how to live this thing instead of experiencing it. If you don't experience it, you're not going to be here long enough to live it. It's not a behavioral modification thing. Your behavior will change as a result of this course of action. I am incapable of changing myself. You hear people say, Change everything. If I could change everything, I wouldn't need to come here. I've been trying to change everything all my life. The only thing I've ever been able to really change is court dates and sobriety dates. And locations given the right thing. Right? So there's some questions here. There's 3 questions in step 1. How many people knew that? To qualify to what type of alcoholic you were. So during the break, we're going to go for a smoke break. Write down what you think without polling the audience. What's the answer? You need to find out for you, based on what we're talking about here. There's 3 questions. Only 3 questions in step 1. How many people knew that? Yeah. See the bolts on the tire. So there's 3 questions in step 1. During the break, write down what you think those 3 questions are.